That monument is the only monument, excuse me, in the Kanchanaburi area that actually indicates the presence of Asian workers and the fact that they died. That monument was erected by the Japanese military in 1944 after the completion of the railway, and it has plaques in English, Chinese. The Japanese could read Chinese in those days, Thai, Tamil, Bahasa Indonesia or Bahasa Malaysia, and also in Vietnamese. We do not know which Vietnamese, how many were involved, because no records have come to light. But the inscription suggests that people from French Indochina were also involved in the building of the railway. So the Japanese military, at least in some sort of ceremony, they made this monument. And today prayers are still given every year. The monument and the land on which it stands is now owned by the Association of Japanese Residents in Thailand. The British government and the Dutch government did make some attempt to repatriate workers, but many of the workers who lived behind in Thailand say they never knew that there were any chances of repatriation. It was never advertised. And you know, when you were mentioning earlier the question of compensation, who is really to blame? I think this is I mean, of course the Japanese, but then they lost the war, so they have no money to give to people. But you know, most of these people, you would think that they were British subjects. They were as British as I am in those days. And you would think that more efforts could have been made by the British government and other authorities to repatriate the workers and at least recognize them. You see, if you're unrecognized and you're just left to a total, 270,000 Asian laborers were also involved. What all the museums say, 2,000, that's all the memorial we have of these laborers, other than the one that I just mentioned, made by the Japanese themselves. It's near the bridge, near the famous bridge in Kanchanaburi. I was visiting one of the cemeteries in Kanchanaburi, and a Tamil laborers, Thai relatives, were visiting the cemetery, and they were asking what had happened. He was called Tosami. Mr. Tosami had requested that the war cemetery authorities petition the British government, the British, not the Japanese, to arrange for his repatriation to India. And I think he was just, you know, regarded as, a nuisance. He'd moved from Kanchanaburi, and his wife's relatives had come. And they told me this story, and they said, well, you know, Mr. Tosami, he looks at the Japanese as just one interlude. He says, you know, he feels that it was the British that were responsible for bringing him to Malaya in the first place. And at the end of the war, the British did nothing to help him to return to Malaya, and at that time he had a brother still living in Malaya, and they did nothing. And he feels it's the British responsibility, and he wanted, I'm sure if the petition, if his request was ever received in London, I'm sure it was ignored. I mean, that's the problem, isn't it? The culture of imperialism is still with us. Mr. Tosami is an Indian. if he'd been a British prisoner of war suddenly turning up in the cemetery, imagine what sort of a fuss would be made. And I don't say that people are bad, I don't mean that. We're all part of these attitudes that just become second nature under this culture of imperialism that obtained. I was born, fortunately, at a time when most of the empire was becoming independent, so I have a slightly different idea, perhaps, but it's still with us. Many governments are rather ashamed that they permitted this recruitment to go on. I mean, that's the first thing. The second thing, of course, is in Malaya. It doesn't particularly, the Malayan experience, it seems to me, doesn't quite fit into the narrative that the Malaysian government would like to present about the last war. You know, there are a lot of grey areas, and I'm not heavens above that, I don't want to get banned, but you know, there are certain grey areas. Of course, the Malay elite cooperated to some extent with the Japanese. I don't blame them, you know, the British have been defeated. This is not a question of criticising them. Perhaps we would all have done the same in a similar situation. Some people did not. Some people, like the Chinese, saw no recourse and immediately started mobilizing. But the point is, this story of the railway, this horrific story, it doesn't quite fit into anybody's narrative of what they would have liked to think that happened during the war. It doesn't even fit with the British narrative. You know, it's a very, very difficult situation to address. You know, we need a memorial to these people. These people died. You said your uncle or your grandfather or somebody went off and didn't come back. Did come back from the railway. Many people did not come back from the railway. They told me that, oh, grandfather went and he never came back, or this and you know, what has happened to them? Do we memorialize these people in this? And 270,000 Asians also were involved. Is that their memorial? We need some. We need to say prayers, and we need to say prayers at a proper place for those departed, and to acknowledge the misery in which they did spend the final days of their life. It's an important thing. At least I think so. I think the only memorial, really, the only official memorial that we saw just recently in Penang, you know, they had the war monument down there on the front by the fort and so on, and it's a war memorial to the First World War and the Second World War and the emergency and this and that and the other. And when the veterans renovated this memorial, I don't know when, they added the death railway. I think that's the only official memorial that I've ever seen.
In Penang.
In Penang.